The morning sun filtered in through the tall paper screen windows of Master Chen's estate, casting soft light across the polished floor and the low lacquered table set at the centre of the main room. The scent of jasmine tea and roasted scallions lingered beneath steam rising from a pan of rice porridge. Jiro moved with quiet purpose, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, placing bowls and chopsticks with precision that felt more like ritual than routine. Across the table, Rose sat with her cloak draped loosely over one shoulder, armour set aside for now. But never far. The fire-heart crystal still glowed faintly at her throat, catching the morning light like a living ember. Her posture was calm, composed, watching. Lyra leaned back against a support pillar just behind her, one leg stretched out, the other drawn up. She picked at her bowl lazily, already halfway through her second cup of tea. She hadn't spoken since sitting down. Lady Vess, seated across from Rose, was impeccably dressed even this early. Her silks pressed, her tone polite, but the edge in her voice was as unmistakable as the fine lines of fatigue near her eyes. "We should move back," Vess said smoothly, lifting her cup without glancing up. "The estate is ours again. Letting it sit vacant this long, it leaves the wrong impression." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You mean the impression that we might actually enjoy a quiet morning without assassins in the drapes?" Rose said nothing. She reached for her tea. Vess continued undeterred. "The living quarters are functional. I've already had 2 rooms restored, and with a few more days—" "We're not short on rooms," Lyra muttered, mouth full. "We're short on people we trust to sleep near us." Vess gave her a sidelong glance. "Then perhaps you should be more selective in who you kill." Rose set her cup down with a quiet clink. "I agree," she said. Vess blinked, caught off guard. Then Rose continued, "The house should not be left unattended." She glanced between them. "But it also shouldn't be reclaimed by appearances alone." Rose reached for her bowl, stirring the porridge with the back of her spoon. "We start small," she said. "Visible presence, quiet control. Vess, you'll oversee the remaining staff who returned. Keep them working, but slow. Measured. No public decrees. No banners until I say so." Vess nodded slowly. "Understood." Rose looked to Lyra. "You'll take 2 of the hall guards and do another sweep. Discreet. I want every crawl space, sigil point, and corridor rechecked." Lyra snorted. "Planning another ambush or just paranoid?" "Both," Rose said without looking up. Lyra grinned. "Fair." Vess added, "There's also the matter of the southern wall. Structural enchantments were broken when Draven's forces took the house. It's stable for now, but—" "Fix it," Rose said, quietly. "We don't need another incident while I'm drinking tea." Jiro returned with more bowls, placing them between them before stepping back into the shadows. He hadn't spoken once, but he was listening. He always was. Rose continued, "I'll remain here for another day, then we move." "Back to the house?" Vess asked, a little too eagerly. Rose met her gaze. "Eventually, but not all at once. We rotate. We're not just rebuilding a home, Vess. We're baiting the ones who think they can still reach into it." Lyra raised her teacup in mock salute. "And here I was, hoping for another full-blown firefight before brunch." "You had 3 last week," Rose said flatly. "Doesn't mean I'm not still hungry." Vess sighed. "She's insufferable." "I'm delightful," Lyra replied. "You're just mad I don't fold linens." Rose stirred her tea once, then set the spoon aside. "We rebuild, yes, but not to restore what was. That's gone." She looked out through the window, toward the city still waking up around them. "We build what's needed next." Vess set her teacup down with a soft clink, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "And what exactly," she asked carefully, "is needed next?" Rose didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, letting the question breathe. Jiro poured another cup of tea for her in silence. Then, softly, Rose spoke. "A purge." The word landed with more weight than volume. Vess blinked. "You mean more executions?" Rose shook her head once. "Not spectacle. Not public hangings or staged displays. This isn't about fear. She turned her gaze back to the table, calm, controlled. It's about removal. Lyra leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. Of what? Rose looked at her. Influence, infiltration, networks that were loyal to Draven, or worse, pretending not to be. Vess frowned. And you intend to root them out yourself? No, Rose said. We will. Her tone made it clear that we was not a suggestion. She reached into her cloak and set a small bundle of scrolls on the table, wrapped in black silk and tied with a wax seal bearing the mark of the House of Night Whispers. Names, she said simply. Lucien confirmed them. Lyra arched a brow. So we're cleaning house? Rose gave the faintest smile. The scrolls sat at the center of the table like coiled snakes, quiet now but promising venom once unwrapped. Lyra reached out and nudged them with one finger. You really know how to start a morning? Rose rose to her feet, the fireheart crystal catching the light as she moved. Better we start it, before someone else does. Lady Vess looked down at the silk-wrapped bundle, her voice soft but steady. Then we begin today. Rose nodded once, already turning toward the hallway. Make no announcements, she said. We don't cleanse corruption by shouting it down. We remove it so cleanly no one remembers it was ever there. As she disappeared into the shadows of the corridor, Lyra leaned back and sighed. Remind me again why I missed her. Vess didn't answer. She just picked up the scrolls carefully, as if they might explode. We're setting the rules for who gets to live in it. The doors of the House of Silver Mirrors opened without ceremony. There was no trumpeted return, no procession. Just the hush of finely heeled boots on polished marble and the scent of rosewater drifting faintly through the air. Rose stepped inside first, cloaked in elegance. Gone was the fire-kissed armor. In its place, a tailored ensemble of deep plum and obsidian silk, draped like midnight over glass. Her gloves were soft leather, her pendant tucked neatly into the folds of her collar. Power didn't scream here. It whispered. Lyra followed 2 steps behind, boots loud by comparison, blades openly worn and visible. Her coat was shorter, more practical, dust still clinging to the hem. She didn't walk like a bodyguard. She walked like a warning. Lady Vess came last, composed, regal, and faintly smug, her heels striking a sharper rhythm against the stone, back where she belonged. In the atrium beneath the crystal ceiling and flanked by 2 rebuilt columns, a man was already waiting. He sat with his legs crossed and a cup of untouched tea in front of him. Older, lean, dressed in navy with silver trim and a badge of a defunct merchant guild barely hidden beneath his lapel. His name was on the list. Halric Vonner, smuggler, whisper broker, and former ally of Draven's administration. The kind who sold neutrality with a smile while leaking names to whichever side was louder. He stood as Rose entered, posture too stiff to be confident, too careful to be casual. Lady Rose, he greeted, voice measured. You look resplendent. Rose stopped just inside the room and gave him a long look, measured, unreadable. I know, she said simply. She moved to the table but didn't sit. Lyra stood behind her, arms folded. Vess took a chair, directly across from Halric, and crossed her legs delicately. Shall we begin? Vess said. Halric tried to smile. Of course. I thought it would be best if we… Rose raised one gloved hand. You thought, she interrupted softly, that by showing up first, we'd mistake presence for loyalty. Halric's smile faltered. Rose tilted her head. I'm here to determine if you're useful. She gestured lightly to the chair across from her. Not if you're guilty. Rose didn't sit. She walked, slow, unhurried steps around the table, her fingers trailing lightly along the back of Halric's chair as she passed. The silk of her gown whispered across the marble. Halric straightened, adjusting his lapel. I understand there's been confusion, misinformation. I thought it best to come directly to you to clear the air before any assumptions. Rose smiled. That's very thoughtful, Halric. You always did know how to sense the direction of the wind. He gave a short, uncomfortable laugh. Well, business makes one adaptable. She paused behind him, her voice light and amused. Adaptable is such a charming word for slippery. His smile faltered again, just slightly. She came around to face him, finally taking her seat. Elegant, measured, like a queen lowering into a throne she didn't need to claim aloud. She leaned slightly forward, resting her chin in one gloved hand. Tell me, she said softly, how long did it take for Draven's people to find you useful? Halric hesitated. I wouldn't say useful implies loyalty. I was a resource, a neutral one. Of course, Rose said, nodding gently. Neutral, like a knife left on a table. No one's fault if someone decides to pick it up. Lyra smirked from her spot near the pillar. Halric shifted in his chair. My dealings were strictly logistical. Trade routes, supply allocations. I had no access to operational decisions. Rose's eyes glimmered. But you knew about them. A pause. I may have heard things, he said carefully. Of course, Rose said again, and I imagine you've kept careful records. A man like you always does. He blinked, then leaned slightly forward. Hooked. If those would be useful to the house again, I'd be happy to share. Under renewed patronage, of course. Rose leaned back slightly, expression still warm. Naturally, but I have to ask, if you're so loyal to the house, why didn't you come forward sooner? Well, things were unstable. I didn't want to cause trouble. I waited for the right moment. The right moment, Rose repeated, letting it roll off her tongue like silk over steel. Isn't it strange how often the right moment follows survival? Halric swallowed. Vess spoke now, calm and crisp. You waited for the smoke to clear. We understand. I acted with caution. You acted with instinct, Rose corrected gently, which is why you're still breathing. She rose again, slow and fluid. Now, let's see what kind of instincts you have left. Her smile was kind, almost fond. Because if your records are real, and your memory intact, we may yet find room for you in this new version of the house. Halric nodded eagerly. Yes, of course, I'll have my ledgers brought within the hour. Rose turned toward the hall, her voice drifting back like a ribbon of perfume. And if they're not? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Rose turned as if the conversation had already ended, because for her, it had. Halric stood awkwardly, unsure whether to bow, speak, or flee. She offered him one final look over her shoulder, her voice soft and sweet. Be useful, Halric. She smiled again, warmer than it should have been. It suits you. Then her eyes slid almost lazily to Lyra. A silent cue. Lyra straightened, the slow grin spreading across her face like a blade slipping free of its sheath. She tilted her head, meeting Halric's eyes, and winked. Halric went pale. Vess didn't even look up as she sipped her tea. Giro, Rose called lightly, already halfway into the hall. See that our guest finds the door. Of course, Lady Rose, came the smooth reply from somewhere down the corridor. Halric stammered a farewell, barely audible as Lyra followed him with a predatory calm that made it very clear. Useful was the only way he'd be left intact. The hallway narrowed as they climbed to the upper wing. Rose moved ahead without speaking, her steps silent but deliberate. This wasn't exploration. It wasn't surprise. She had been here once already, just over a week ago, when the dust was still thick and the air tasted like someone else's breath. This time, it was reclamation. She opened the door to her office with a quiet flick of her wrist. Inside, the furniture remained as it had. Her original desk still in place beneath the tall arched window, the workbench unmoved, the faint shimmer of her pocket realm, sigils intact beneath the rug. She'd confirmed that on her last visit. What had changed? The energy. It was hers again. She stepped inside and exhaled slowly, scanning the room, not to search, but to decide. Behind her, Lyra leaned casually in the doorway. Planning to redecorate? Rose didn't look at her. I'm removing the clutter. Her eyes settled on the 2 cabinets Draven's people had installed, ornate but garish, out of place in a room built for precision and purpose. She tapped one with her gloved hand, then turned to Lady Vess. These go. Today. I want the original aesthetic restored. Clean lines, shadowed corners. I designed this room to speak for me. Vess gave a nod. Understood. This office isn't storage, it's strategy. I'll need the mirror lines reconnected. Quietly, no announcements, no teams. Lyra tilted her head. You rebuilding the web? Rose gave a small, measured smile. I'm making sure the city remembers who hears everything first. Then she turned back to the desk, opened the centre drawer, and began clearing it. As Rose finished smoothing the inner drawer, content with the reclaimed silence of her office, Lyra stepped inside. No smirk this time, no sarcasm, just that calm, steady gait that said she had something worth saying. So, Lyra said casually, I took a stroll while you were out playing Queen of the Whispers. Rose didn't look up from the desk. The East Wing? Lyra leaned against the nearest bookshelf, arms crossed. You know me too well. I know what Vess said about that wing. I also know how little you care. Lyra shrugged. She told me to stay out. Naturally, I didn't. Now Rose looked up. I found something, Lyra said, in the Hall of Whispers. Rose arched a brow. Lyra went on. Not a real archive, but something close. Mirrors, cabinets, shelves set up like a staging ground. Too neat, too obvious. Rose's eyes narrowed. That space was supposed to be empty. Vess told me it had been stripped. Well, she either lied, Lyra said, or forgot to check under the rug. She stepped forward and dropped her voice just enough to be personal. There's a warded cabinet in the floor beneath the pedestal. Old, elegant, elven make but layered in House of Mirrors sigils. Rose stood slowly and turned from the desk slowly, eyes narrowing as she processed what Lyra had just told her. You're sure? She asked. Lyra nodded once. Too polished to be accidental. It was meant to look like an archive, but just wrong enough to be missed by someone like Draven. Rose crossed the room and stood by the tall window, her reflection ghosted in the glass. She folded her arms. I didn't authorize anything like that, she said quietly. Not for this house. Lyra stepped in closer, voice low. So the question is, who did? And why? Rose said nothing at first, just stared at the light curling through the broken clouds outside, then, don't seal it. Lyra blinked. No? No, Rose said, turning back toward her with a look that was pure calculation. I want to know who goes near it, who touches it, who waits until they think no one's watching. She stepped back to the centre of the room, her tone like silk pressed against steel. Let them think I still don't know. Lyra smirked. You want me to keep an eye on it? I want you to haunt it, Rose said smoothly. Quiet, unseen. Watch the watchers. Now that, Lyra said with a grin, is more my style. Rose's gaze drifted back to her desk. Let's see what secrets this house still thinks it owns. The moment passed in silence. Then the door opened. Lady Vess stepped in, trailed by a poised young attendant, carrying a small notepad and a dusting cloth. Vess's voice was already mid-sentence, polished and purposeful. And please make sure to catalogue what's inside those cabinets before they're removed. I don't want anything discarded until I've personally reviewed. She paused, taking in the room. Rose standing by the desk, Lyra leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Her expression smoothed. Ah, I see you've begun reclaiming the space. Rose turned slowly. It was overdue. Vess smiled, motioning toward the cabinets. I've assigned someone to assist you in clearing the clutter. You shouldn't have to manage that alone. Lyra arched an eyebrow. How thoughtful. The attendant stepped quietly toward the furniture, but Rose lifted a hand, graceful, not sharp. Later, she said simply. The assistant froze, then retreated a half step, glancing to Vess. Vess's smile didn't falter. Of course, whatever pace you need. She turned to leave, her silks trailing behind her, but just before the door closed, she looked back and said, I'm glad you're making this place yours again. Then she was gone. Rose waited until the footsteps had faded. Then, to Lyra, You see that? Lyra nodded. She doesn't know we know. Rose turned back to her desk. Good. The coach was quiet as it rolled through the narrow streets of Concordia's upper district. No banners flew from the carriage, no sigils marked the doors, just polished black wood, silver trim, and the faint drifting scent of sage and myrrh, the kind of scent that meant presence without pageantry. Inside, Rose sat in composed silence, legs crossed, hands gloved, and folded neatly in her lap. Her attire was tailored for diplomacy, deep green silk, high-collared, trimmed in pale gold. The Fireheart crystal was hidden today, tucked beneath fabric and subtle wards. Beside her, Lyra lounged, boots up, blades visible, expression unreadable. This one's not going to beg, Lyra said. I don't need him to beg, Rose replied. I just need him to believe. They arrived at a quiet stone estate, tucked into the hillside. No guards at the gate, but watchers behind the windows. Always watchers. The door opened before they reached it. Lord Renmar Hale waited inside. He was an older man with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, an economist turned information merchant who had once backed the House of Silver Mirrors with coin, logistics, and whispered favours. He had survived the Draven years by remaining politically invisible. Too invisible. In the sitting room, Rose took the centre chair. Renmar poured tea himself. I wasn't sure if your invitation was formality or formality with teeth, he said lightly. Rose smiled. That depends entirely on how sharp your memory is. Renmar chuckled, offering her a cup. Then let me start by saying, I'm glad you're alive. And I'm here to see if you're still useful. She said it with grace, with warmth even, but it landed exactly where she wanted it to. Renmar sipped his tea, calm, polished, unafraid, which made him dangerous. Rose smiled politely, letting the silence hang for a breath longer than was comfortable. You kept your head down, she said at last. Smart. He inclined his head. I've always preferred shadows to stages. Yet you were once very invested in mine. Renmar gave a diplomatic shrug. I backed stability. When the house was strong, I was proud to be near it. When it burned, I chose not to burn with it. Rose leaned forward slightly, fingers resting on the rim of her teacup. Clever, she said, but not infallible. Renmar's eyes narrowed just slightly. You think I backed the wrong side? I think, she said sweetly, you're waiting to see if this one wins. He didn't answer, so she pressed, gently. You had access to trade records, shipment routes, diplomatic filters that kept the Silver Mirrors solvent even during the lean years. She stirred her tea once. You didn't stop supplying when Draven took the house, but you didn't start working against him either. Renmar's jaw tightened. And now? Now, Rose said, I need someone who knows how to operate below the table without vanishing beneath it. She let her eyes linger on his. I don't want revenge, Renmar. I want reach, and you've always had very long arms. He nodded slowly. So, this is my interview? This, Rose said with a smile, is your chance to choose a side. And if you choose right, your past will be a footnote. He was silent a long time. Then, and if I choose wrong? Rose rose to her feet, finishing her tea. Then your future becomes one. The silence lingered as Rose turned to leave, her cup set down with surgical precision. Renmar shifted slightly in his chair, adjusting his sleeve, still poised, but no longer entirely composed. And then Lyra moved. She hadn't spoken once since entering the room. But now, as she stepped closer, her bootfalls just audible over the ticking clock, she reached out and gently ran a single finger across the polished wood of the mantel behind his chair. "You ever seen what a whisper looks like when it bleeds?" she asked softly. Renmar froze. She smiled, sharp and unkind. "Don't worry, it doesn't scream, just sort of leaks." The colour drained slightly from his face. He looked at Rose, whose back was half turned, already walking toward the door. "I have something," he said quickly. "A ledger, not recent, but coded references. Trade contacts I was told to sever during the takeover. Some of them never stopped moving product." Rose paused, turned back. "Draven's people? I don't know who they answer to now," Renmar said, voice steadier but lower. "But they were connected, and cautious. They'll surface again if someone doesn't stop them." Rose nodded once. "Send it. Discreetly. If it's clean, you'll hear from me again." Renmar gave a tight nod. Lyra grinned, tipping an invisible hat. As they stepped out into the corridor, Rose didn't speak right away. Finally she murmured, "That was cruel." Lyra shrugged. "He deserved worse." Rose smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "but now he thinks we're merciful." The invitation was handwritten. Simple, elegant. No house sigil, no seal. Just a name, a time, and a location. But the weight of it was unmistakable. Councillor Thren Avalon was not a man used to being summoned. He had survived the Draven years with a veneer of neutrality and a backroom full of favours. Some called him the voice of balance, others the Chancellor of Silence. He called himself untouchable. So when he entered the restored private chamber in the east wing of the House of Silver Mirrors, he did so with all the arrogance of a man who thought the game was still his, to rig. Rose sat waiting. Not in armour, not in gold, but in black, tailored, precise, elegant enough to rival a coronation and sharp enough to draw blood. She sat with one leg crossed, one gloved hand resting on the edge of her chair, and the fireheart crystal hidden beneath her collar, like a secret waiting to burn. No guards, no audience, just Lyra, standing in the corner with arms folded, watching like a storm on pause. "Lady Rose," Thren said smoothly as he entered, "I admit I was surprised to receive your message." Rose didn't rise. "Good. I hate being predictable." Thren smirked. "I expected your people to seek my support eventually, but I would have thought Vess would reach out first. Less dramatic that way." Rose tilted her head slightly. "You think this is dramatic?" He gestured around them. "No aides, no scribes, just tea and tension." She smiled faintly. "You should be grateful." His brow furrowed slightly. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit, Councillor. You came all this way. Let's find out if your influence still buys you anything." Thren took the offered chair without hesitation. No bow, no courtesy. He crossed one leg over the other, adjusted the cuff of his navy sleeve, and offered a thin, practiced smile. "I must say, your return has stirred quite the ripple. The fires, the banners, the public reappearance. Very theatrical." Rose's expression didn't change. "I thought you appreciated theatre," she said. "I appreciate order," Thren replied, "and power that knows how to stay quiet. You've always had presence, Lady Rose, but presence alone isn't influence." Rose didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Thren leaned forward, voice smooth and confident. "Concordia thrives because of stability. Men like me ensure that while nobles play at reclaiming lost titles, I supported the house when it mattered. I kept certain doors closed when others wanted to burn them down." Rose let the silence stretch. Then, finally, "You protected yourself." Thren's eyes flickered. "I protected the balance," he said, correcting her. "And I still can. But let's not pretend this is about loyalty. You brought me here because you know I'm necessary." He smiled again. wider now. You need my connections, my voice in the trade courts, my neutrality. Rose set her hands gently on the arms of her chair. No, Counselor, she said. I brought you here to find out if you're useful. Thren blinked. She continued, calm and sharp as silk drawn taut. Because neutrality isn't strength, it's fear with better tailoring. Lyra gave a low, quiet chuckle from the corner. Thren's jaw tightened. I think you underestimate what I can still control. Rose's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, with precision. No, she said. I think you overestimate how long that control lasts once someone stops pretending it matters. Thren's smirk returned, smug and unshaken. You've always been clever, Rose, but let's not forget your place. You were an information broker, a glorified scribe with a penchant for secrets. Rose didn't move. Thren went on, the smile deepening. Now you're dressing up power like it's perfume, hiding behind theatrics and a dog on a leash. He didn't finish, because Lyra moved. One heartbeat, and she was across the room, steel half-drawn, hand at his throat, her weight slamming him back into the chair so hard it cracked. Say it again, she growled low and deadly. Thren choked, frozen. Lyra's eyes burned, not with rage, with precision, like she was calculating exactly where to end him. Enough. Rose's voice was soft, but it cut through the air like cold iron. Lyra didn't look at her, but she obeyed. She pulled back slowly, fingers leaving a faint red line where her nails had pressed too deep into Thren's throat. She turned away with a predator's grace, sliding her blade back into its sheath. Rose stepped forward, no fury, no theatrics, just absolute stillness. She looked down at Thren as he gasped, straightening in the chair, red blooming at his collar. You forgot something, she said quietly. You're not here because you're important. She leaned in, voice velvet and ice. You're here because you're expendable. He opened his mouth to speak. She didn't let him. You insulted the only reason you're still breathing. She glanced to Lyra, then back to him. And then you proved you're not just arrogant, but stupid. She straightened, which means you're no longer useful. Thren was trembling now, trying to regain his voice, his dignity, anything. But Rose wasn't finished. She extended her hand, and with a subtle pulse, a faint shimmer of flame coiled at her fingertips. Not wild, not chaotic, controlled, beautiful, deadly. Thren's eyes widened. What are you? You're going to walk out of here, Rose said softly, alive, but changed. She leaned in, her tone velvet. I want every door you walk through to pause, every conversation to shift when you enter. I want you to feel what it means to be seen. She raised her hand toward his cheek. You insulted me in my house. You threatened what I built. You wanted to remind the world who you are. Her fingers touched his skin. Let me help. The sizzle was sharp, brief. The scent of scorched flesh bloomed in the room, just beneath the lingering tea and tension. Thren cried out, just once before biting it back through clenched teeth. Rose withdrew her hand. A perfect rose sigil, seared into his right cheek, now glowed faintly with a silvery heat. It would fade, eventually, but the scar would not. Rose turned to Lyra. See him to the door. Lyra smiled. I'll make sure he doesn't trip. As Thren stumbled past, shaking, face turned from the light, Rose watched him go with the calm of a storm receding. Tell your friends, she said, barely above a whisper. I'm not rebuilding. I'm reclaiming. Thren stumbled into the main corridor, one hand pressed against the side of his face, the smell of scorched flesh still clinging to his silk collar. His steps were uneven, stiff, not from injury alone, but from shock. Behind him, Lyra walked at an easy pace, unhurried, unconcerned. A predator who'd already made her point. She didn't touch him again. She didn't need to. He'd never forget who stopped her the first time. At the far end of the hall, Lady Vess emerged from the side corridor, followed by two of her personal aides. She slowed the moment she saw Thren, then stopped entirely. Her eyes narrowed, taking in the slight tremble in his hand, the blood at the edge of his collar, and the burnt, silver-scarred rose sigil on his cheek. One of her aides gasped. Vess said nothing. Not yet. Thren didn't meet her eyes as he passed. He kept his head low, his steps quickening, as if shame alone could outrun reputation. Lyra offered a quick wink to Vess as she followed behind him. "Don't worry," she said cheerfully. "He got to keep all his teeth." Vess's gaze followed Thren's retreating figure until the main doors closed behind him. Then slowly, she turned toward Lyra. "When Rose said she was reclaiming Concordia," Vess murmured, "I didn't realize she meant one face at a time." Lyra just smirked. "That's the subtle version." Vess didn't smile, but she didn't look away from the doors either. And in her silence, one truth was clear. She knew the rules had changed. Lady Vess entered the upper salon with deliberate grace, dismissing her attendants with a flick of her hand. The doors shut behind her. Rose stood by the tall window, back half-turned, a fresh scroll open on the table beside her. The light cast a warm glow over the polished surface. Innocent, quiet. Vess didn't speak right away. Rose did. "That was for him," she said calmly, "and for everyone watching." Vess approached slowly, every step measured. "He'll bleed that mark into every room he enters." "That's the point. Some will call it brutality." Rose turned now, facing her fully. "Let them." Her tone was calm, but the fire behind her eyes hadn't cooled. Vess studied her a moment. "You've always been the one who dealt in whispers, in favours, influence. You were never theatrical." Rose's smile was faint. "A crown doesn't just sit on your head, Vess. Sometimes you have to nail it there." Vess circled the table slowly, trailing her fingers along its edge. "You've marked a counsellor." "I've claimed a coward," Rose corrected. "And I've reminded the others that silence doesn't make you clean." There was a pause, and then Vess said, "Are you trying to make enemies?" "No," Rose said. "I'm making sure they know I'm not afraid of them anymore." Another silence followed. Longer this time. Then, unexpectedly, Vess nodded. "You're changing." Rose's gaze didn't waver. "I'm evolving." Rose turned back to the table, picked up the scroll she'd set aside, and unrolled it halfway. Her finger traced a name near the centre of the list, neatly inked, carefully marked. Commander Kael Varner. A decorated tactician. Once a symbol of Concordia's strength during the Eastern Siege, retired with honours. Quiet during Draven's rise. Too quiet. Rose didn't look up as she asked, "Tell me, Vess, how would you handle a man like Kael Varner?" Vess approached slowly, peering down at the name. She exhaled just slightly. "He was a sword, not a schemer. Loyal to the city, but not to any one house. He followed the strongest current." "And now?" "Now?" Vess folded her arms. "He's old, still dangerous, but mostly forgotten. The kind who trains a new generation in quiet backyards while pretending he doesn't see what's coming." Rose nodded slightly. "Would he accept a seat at the table again?" Vess tilted her head. "Depends on how it's offered." Rose looked up. "I'm not offering. I'm deciding if the table needs fewer chairs." That earned a small smile from Vess. "You don't want to threaten him. That'll make him stand, but give him purpose? A mission? He might just kneel." Rose's brow lifted slightly. "You think he still wants to matter?" "He always wanted to serve something," Vess replied. "He just never cared what, as long as it had a flag." Rose was silent a moment, weighing it. Then she nodded once. "I'll speak to him, personally." "And if he refuses?" Rose's expression was calm as glass. "Then I'll take the flag off his grave." The Varnor estate stood just outside Concordia's southern ridge, far enough from the city's noise to be forgotten, close enough to see its smoke. Rose approached on foot. No escort, no fanfare. The gate was open. The walkway swept beneath a canopy of old ironwood trees, their leaves a faded gold in the late morning light. The stone path was clean but unpolished, worn down by years of bootsteps that had once marched in perfect rhythm. Commander Cale Varner had not been seen in court for 5 years, but his estate breathed discipline. When the door opened, it wasn't a servant who greeted her. It was Cale himself. Tall, broad-shouldered. White-haired now, but sharp-eyed and straight-backed. His coat was simple, dark grey wool over a reinforced vest, sleeves rolled just enough to show the scars of old campaigns. He offered a small nod. "Lady Rose." "Commander," she replied with equal calm. "Come in." He led her through the main hall, stone floor, muted tapestries, a blade mounted over the hearth. The sitting room had no servants, no distractions, just a fire, 2 chairs and a small tea set placed between them, the kind of room where words mattered. Cale poured the tea himself. "You've made a stir," he said evenly. "Word is you burned out the Black Dawn in broad daylight." "Only the ones that stood in my way." He nodded. "Good." He passed her a cup. Rose accepted it, eyes never leaving his. "No love for them?" "Never did," Cale said simply. "I served the realm, not its poison." There was a quiet pause. Then he added, "Which is why you're here." Cale sipped his tea, watching the firelight flicker along the rim of his cup. "Word travels, Rose." "Even out here?" She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Wasn't long after the smoke cleared in murk dust that rumours started surfacing, Black Dawn forces wiped out, leadership fractured, portals locked down. He paused, just long enough to let the next line land. Humans and elves fighting side by side, the pack on the front lines, Echo Division in full strength. Rose's gaze sharpened. Only slightly. He smiled. Sounded like quite the operation. She set her cup down. "I wouldn't know," she said evenly. Cale nodded, that same calm look never faltering. "Of course not. Just a rumour." "Funny thing, though. Rumours like that usually don't come from storytellers." He met her eyes directly. "They come from survivors." Rose leaned back slowly in her chair, still composed, still unreadable. "And what do you think happened there?" Cale's expression didn't change. "I think Draven underestimated what happens when people stop waiting for orders and start fighting for each other. I think someone lit that fire from the inside." Rose sat across from him, perfectly composed, her gloves folded in her lap, the steam of her untouched tea curling upward like a question that hadn't yet been asked. Cale had already spoken once. Now he sipped his tea again and spoke a second time. "Word travels." He didn't elaborate, didn't lean in, just let the weight of it land between them. Rose didn't look away. "It always has." Cale gave a small, knowing nod. "They say murk dust was lit from the inside. That fire came through stone like it knew where to burn." He set the cup down gently. "They say it wasn't a raid. It was a reckoning." Rose's face remained unreadable. He smiled slightly. "Humans and elves, side by side. Not many could arrange that." Her tone was smooth, deflective. "Rumours like to dress themselves up in heroes and legends. Helps them sell better in taverns." Cale chuckled, not mockingly, just like a man who'd heard too many of those stories himself. "Drunk soldiers don't lie, Rose. They just forget who they're talking to." That drew her eyes, quietly, sharply. Cale shrugged, not pressing. "You'd be amazed what makes its way down the line. Doesn't matter what flag they served under. They all talk, especially after a bottle and a battle." Rose's expression didn't shift, but her posture changed, slightly. A tilt of her chin, a faint narrowing of her gaze. "You've been listening." "I've been watching," he corrected, "even when no one asked me to." He held her gaze now, his voice low but even. "I served this city before it forgot who it was, and I didn't stop just because it fell quiet." Another pause. Then, softly, "You didn't stop either." Rose let that sit a moment, then picked up her tea. Sipped once. Set it down. I'm not here for stories, Kale. I know, he said. You're here to see if I'm still useful. She gave the faintest smile. Are you? Kale leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His hands were calloused, steady. I worked with the underground during Draven's rise, supplied the resistance, fed contacts when I could, never took credit, never left a trail. He let the weight of those words land. And if you're building something worth protecting again, I'd rather be inside the walls than watching them burn from a hilltop. Rose regarded him for a long, quiet moment. Then, calmly, she said, There are names I need eyes on. Voices that stayed quiet a little too long during Draven's rise, and a few that are still whispering in places I don't like. Kale nodded once. No threats, no blades, just the kind of clarity that doesn't come from court records. He stood, the floorboards creaking softly under his boots. Without another word, he crossed the room to a narrow cabinet tucked between two war banners. Opened it. Inside, crystal tumblers, a decanter of something deep gold, and a locked compartment built beneath the shelf. He poured 2 drinks, measured even, and slid the lower panel open. From it, he withdrew a slim leather folder. Then he returned, offering Rose 1 glass before he eased back into his chair. A toast, he said quietly. She lifted her glass. 2? He smiled. Continuity. They drank. The burn was clean, sharp, and lingering, like memory. Then Kale set his glass down and passed her the folder. Figured you'd ask for this, he said, his voice steady. Names, networks, 2 from the inside, 1 working both sides. None of them know I still pay attention. Rose opened the folder, scanned the first page. Her brow didn't lift, but her silence said everything. Kyle leaned back, satisfied. And then, with a faint wink, welcome back. The fire had burned low. Their glasses sat half-finished. Rose closed the folder slowly and looked up at Kale, who watched her with the quiet steadiness of a man who didn't need to speak first. She folded her gloves in her lap. You're not retired, she said. It wasn't a question. Kale gave the faintest tilt of his head. I'm not deployed. There's a difference. Rose nodded once, thoughtful. Good. Then you'll understand when I say this city needs more than soldiers. It needs watchers, observers. Someone who sees the collapse long before the bricks fall. Kale said nothing, but the air shifted, sharpened. She continued. I want you in the walls. I want you behind the mirrors. I don't need approval. I need foresight, leverage, truth. A pause. Then, I want you as my intelligence officer. Kale didn't move, but his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that wasn't surprise. It was recognition. Of purpose, of necessity, of war disguised in politics. And if I say no? He asked. Rose smiled faintly. Then you'll keep watching from your hilltop, and one day I'll send someone else up there to find out why. Kale exhaled through his nose. Not offense. Something closer to amusement. Not many people would offer that job and a warning in the same breath. Rose stood slowly. I don't offer jobs. I offer roles worth surviving for. He stood too. After a beat, he extended his hand. I'm in. She shook it. Brief. Solid. Then Kale added, I'll need clearance. Names. Movement channels. Rose's expression stayed smooth. You'll have everything I can give. A voice cut in from the doorway. Except a leash. They turned. Lyra leaning in the doorway, 1 hand braced against the frame, 1 brow arched high. I hope you know what you're signing up for, General. Kale gave her a once-over. I know exactly what I'm walking into. Lyra smirked. Good. I hate having to explain myself. Kale's smile was dry. I don't expect you to. Rose watched them both, then turned for the door. If you 2 start stabbing each other, she said over her shoulder, do it outside. I like this rug. Rose stepped past Lyra without another word, her cloak brushing the doorframe as she moved into the cooling light outside. Lyra followed, her bootsteps quiet but unmistakable, never trailing, always shadowing. Behind them, the door remained open for a moment. Cale stood in its frame, watching them disappear down the path of worn stone and drifting leaves. Just before Rose reached the gate, he called out, not loudly, just enough. "I'll be in town soon." She slowed, turned halfway. "We'll talk then," he added. Her reply was subtle, a nod. Nothing more. Then she and Lyra vanished through the trees, swallowed by Concordia's edge, the fire behind them fading to coal. Cale lingered in the doorway a moment longer, then turned back into his home, already clearing the tea tray, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Master Chen's garden, Concordia. The garden was smaller than she remembered. Maybe it was always this size. Maybe everything else had just grown louder, heavier, harder. The wind was soft here, different than the sharp currents that swept through Concordia's skyline. It carried warmth instead of warning. The scent of jasmine clung to the stone path like memory. Rose walked with slow, measured steps, her boots almost soundless on the worn stones. She wore no armor today, no jeweled cloak, just a deep grey robe and a long sash that brushed the grass as she moved. Her hair was unbound. She passed through the trellised archway and into the quiet centre of the garden, where Master Chen's shrine stood, nestled beneath the bowed limbs of an old silverbark tree. The shrine was simple, a stone lantern, a flat platform for offerings, a single faded cushion that had once hosted hours of quiet conversation. It hadn't changed. But on the stone, still untouched by time or weather, was the she had left a couple months ago, silver charm. She knelt slowly, not as a warrior, not as a leader, just as Rose. Her hand hovered over the charm but didn't pick it up. Instead, she looked past it, to the empty cushion where he used to sit. "I don't know what you'd say right now." Her voice was quiet, steady. "I think you'd frown. That little disappointed sigh, the one you saved for when I did something clever and cruel." A faint breeze stirred the edges of her robe. "I told myself I was becoming like you, that I was rebuilding this city with influence instead of fire." She exhaled. "But I burned them anyway." She looked down at the charm. "I killed Draven." She let the words settle. There was no weight to them anymore. No sting. Just fact. "He was my first teacher after I fled. He taught me how to read people, how to shape power with the portals." Her jaw tightened. "And when I got too close, he used me, just like the Order." She didn't wipe the tear that slid down her cheek. "I burned him alive." A pause. "Part of me enjoyed it." She swallowed hard. "That part frightens me." She shifted on her knees, folding her hands in her lap. "I never told anyone what Kalian really was. They wouldn't believe me. Not even Gunnar." Her lips thinned at the name. "He killed him, Master. The one I thought was charming, clever. The one who helped me build my fire." She stared at the shrine. "He was Ultranacious." The garden held its breath. "And now, he has a son." She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees. "They made me in the Order, rewired me, gave me a face that wasn't mine, taught me pain was the price of power." Her voice cracked just slightly. "That boy, whoever he is, he didn't choose any of this either." She closed her eyes. "So tell me, Master, what do I do? Do I kill him because of who his father was?" She opened her eyes, red-rimmed but fierce. "Or do I break the chain?" She went quiet for a long moment, her breathing shallow. Finally she stood, picked up the charm, held it in her palm like it still carried warmth. "I'm tired, Master, so goddamn tired." She looked up at the tree, of being the one who always has to choose. Rose stood there in silence, the silver charm in her hand, when the memory crept in, slow and subtle, like the scent of the tea he used to steep before sunrise. Years ago, The garden at dusk. The lanterns were already lit when she'd stormed into the garden, still seething from the encounter with the border magistrate. She was younger then, no fire in her hands, but fire in her voice. "They think I'm weak," she snapped, pacing like a caged animal. "Because I don't raise my voice, because I smile, because I didn't burn his damn contract in front of the entire council." Master Chen sat calmly by the shrine, his legs folded, a small pot of tea cooling beside him. He didn't look at her, he trimmed a bonsai branch instead. "I could have ended him," Rose growled. Master Chen replied without looking up. "Yes." Silence. She waited. Then, "So why didn't you?" Rose's mouth opened and closed. "I don't know," she admitted. Master Chen nodded once. "Good." He set the trimming scissors down and looked at her. "There is power in restraint, Rose. But don't confuse it with mercy." She blinked. "Aren't they the same?" "No," he said gently. "Mercy is a gift. Restraint is a weapon. One you use on yourself." He poured her a cup of tea and held it out. "Anyone can destroy. Few can choose not to." Now, the present. Rose exhaled slowly, the weight of that moment pressing against her ribs. She looked down at the charm again, tarnished silver catching just enough light to remind her. She once believed in mercy, and she still might, just enough to hesitate. She lingered in the memory for a breath longer, fingers closing around the charm as though it might speak again. Then she felt it, the subtle shift in air, the soft brush of motion at the edge of the garden path. She didn't turn. "How long have you been watching?" A pause. Then the voice came, low and warm. "Only long enough to know Master Chen would have been proud." "Jiro." He stepped into the garden quietly, hands folded before him, his posture humble but never small. His grey robe caught the breeze, and his boots made no sound on the stone. Rose didn't move. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said, "but your voice, it carries when you speak to him." Still she didn't turn. "And you listened." "I always do." She finally looked over her shoulder. His expression was calm, no pity, no judgment, just the same grounded serenity that had defined Master Chen. "You heard everything?" He nodded once. "Enough." She turned back toward the shrine, voice flat. "Then you know I'm losing faith." Jiro stepped to her side, a respectful distance kept between them. "Then you're more like him than you think." That made her glance his way, eyebrows arched just slightly. Jiro gestured toward the shrine. He questioned too. You just never saw it. He used to ask the wind for answers he already knew, because sometimes speaking it aloud was the only way to make peace with what had to be done. Rose looked away again, jaw clenched. And what would he say about a child born from Ultranacious? Jiro didn't answer right away. When he did, it was soft. He'd say it matters more what that child becomes than where they came from. Rose closed her eyes. The charm in her hand felt heavier now, and somehow lighter. She was quiet for a long time. The garden rustled around them, leaves sighing in the breeze, birds shifting in the branches overhead. The shrine stood still. The fire in her chest burned quietly now, for once not demanding anything of her. Then Rose spoke again. Not sharp, not cold, just tired. "Do you think I should tell him?" Jiro didn't pretend to misunderstand. He looked at her, really looked, past the fire, the strategy, the sigils etched in blood. "You've already decided," he said gently. She blinked. "Have I?" Jiro gave the faintest smile. "You wouldn't ask if you hadn't." Rose looked down at the silver charm again. "It'll change everything," she murmured. "It already has," Jiro replied. She nodded once, then slipped the charm into her pocket, turned toward the path, and walked back into the wind. House of Silver Mirrors, upper wing. The sunlight had shifted by the time Rose returned to the estate. She didn't waste time changing. She walked the halls in the same grey robe she'd worn to Master Chen's shrine, subdued, simple, unadorned. But somehow, she seemed even more in control than when she wore her armor. She found Lyra where she expected, on the upper balcony outside the Hall of Whispers, sitting on the ledge with a blade in her lap, sharpening it with a slow, lazy rhythm that didn't match the focus in her eyes. "You look like you're waiting for someone to disappoint you," Rose said, arms crossed. Lyra glanced over, smirked. "I usually am." Rose didn't return the smile. Instead, she stepped closer. "I'm going back to Earth for a few days." Lyra's smirk faded. "Alone?" Rose nodded. "Yes, but while I'm gone, I need eyes here. Quiet ones." Lyra set the blade down. "You want me on the archive?" "I want more than that," Rose said. "I want to know who built it, who still touches it, and what they've hidden that they were too afraid to give to Draven." Lyra leaned forward. "You want me to play nice?" Rose's voice lowered. "I want you to play smart." There was a pause. Then Rose added, "And if someone shows their hand while I'm away, don't cut it off." Lyra grinned. "Just dislocate a few fingers." "I trust your restraint as much as I trust your sarcasm." Lyra stood, tossing the dagger into its sheath. "Then I'll make sure they bleed quietly." Downstairs, Rose crossed the marble corridor and entered the restored study where Lady Vess was overseeing a report from 2 returning loyalists. The moment she saw Rose, she dismissed them with a flick of her hand and a polite smile. Rose didn't sit. "I'll be gone a few days," she said. "Back to Earth." Vess raised a brow. "Something important?" "You'll survive not knowing." Vess gave a cool smile. "How generous of you." Rose stepped closer, voice lowering. "I'm trusting you to manage the house while I'm gone." Vess blinked, surprised but careful not to show it. "That's a bold show of confidence." "No," Rose said. "It's a longer leash." She held Vess's gaze, voice calm as ever. "And if you choke yourself with it, I won't be the one pulling." The room was silent when Rose returned to her quarters. Her steps echoed faintly across the stone, but she didn't rush. Every movement was deliberate. She approached the stand where her armor waited, fire-kissed crimson, reinforced with ash-black plating etched in ancient runes. It shimmered faintly in the low light. She unwrapped the sash around her waist, letting it fall away as she stepped out of her robe. Piece by piece she slid into the armor, fitting it like memory. The chest plate clicked into place. The gauntlets tightened against her forearms. She reached for the final piece, the Fireheart crystal, now pulsing quietly in its pendant setting. It was warm, steady. She fastened it around her neck and exhaled as the heat pulsed once through her bones. Not painful, not violent, just her. At the corner of the desk lay a worn leather pouch no larger than her palm. She opened it carefully, drawing out a single silver talisman, etched with runes gifted by Eliana herself. Rose held it between her fingers, whispered an activation phrase in low Elvish, and waited. The air in the room shifted, light bent slightly inward, and a pulse of old magic shimmered across the walls like a breath held in suspension. When the connection stabilized, she spoke. "Eliana, I need a gate to the Pax workshop." No hesitation, just purpose.